Yep. All right. I'm going to pop out the chat.
Sharing.
Screen sharing. I'm going to unpin myself. Just do one more mic check. Barbudo's on. Oh boy.
Man, this guy must want to get better.
All right.
Well,
I'm going to unpin myself. And Chris, the floor is yours.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining. I get a lot of, I think, pleasure out of doing these things and interacting and talking about hitting. It's over the years, you just develop a lot of, I don't know, appreciation for the game and the tools and the trade. And I didn't really realize when I was going to become the old guy, but I kind of am the old guy now. I like to consider myself young still, but there's a lot of things that I've learned from older guys, and the whole idea of paying it forward and really thinking about things on kind of a different level is what I think really excites me. And, connecting a lot of the pieces that are, I think, beyond the surface level. And obviously this is kind of an interesting topic because, and it's happened to me a lot personally lately. I have relationships with a lot of young hitters, college hitters, who I'm going to talk about a little bit without really like divulging too much information about them. And part of why this topic came up, and I think the trend of where the industry is going. So using video as a crutch, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Let's jump into it. Video is obviously a really good tool, but just like any other really good tool, when you use it properly, it's awesome. The analogy I like to use is thinking about, if you're a carpenter or in construction or anything like that, you have access to all these tools, right? You have skill saws and power drills and nail guns and things like that. And all those tools, when used correctly, are awesome. They've helped make life much easier and more efficient. They've helped us as society, people do, these great things. So technological advances are always good, in that they're meant for the thing that is good. But there's always like these kind of unintended consequences. If you look at a nail gun, if you use a nail gun improperly, it could be really dangerous. So that's kind of the same way I'm going to correlate this whole story. In my opinion, the things we should use video for are to build confidence, to get positive feedback from good results. There's in today's society, we can get video as easily as we can do anything else in the world. Just pick up our phone, turn the video on, and all of a sudden it's there. So I think there's like this crutch where like players are just picking up their phones and videotaping everything. The things that I used video for was to see positive, to reinforce positive. I wanted to absorb the information from those swings and help build my confidence, because confidence is in my little triangle that I talk about that is the shape of a player. There's really three things that affect it. It's not like this, staying even keeled, positive, negative. It's more of a web or triangle, if you want to call it. There's this confidence piece. There's this humility piece. And then there's this insecurity piece. And like all three of those things kind of have to balance each other and move organically, depending on situations. Like you always have to be confident as a player. But within that confidence, I think you have to stay humble to know that the game can kick your ass on any given day, right? 0 for 4 with 4 punchies is just waiting around the corner. I tell kids all the time, opening day, don't care how many swings you took this offseason. Like you could be the most confident player possible going into opening day, and 0 for 4 is still waiting for you out there. So, and then the other piece is like this like little insecurity thing. There's like this balance. And I think to maintain your confidence when the game gets hard, you have to be like a little bit insecure and make excuses about why. And I have a picture of Jose in here, and we talked to him in the podcast on Monday, and we released it Tuesday. Jose was the best that I've ever seen anyway at having this ability to be like, well, that wasn't a strike. And I'm like, dude, it was right there. The pitch was right there. And he's like, no, the box was off on TV. So the confidence piece of it is huge. And I think video analysis can be used for that. Watching good swings that you've taken over and over again, understanding the moments where you created them. That's where I think the biggest benefit of video comes from. And then obviously, like from a mechanical, physical standpoint, there's two really things that I like to hamper on. Well, number one is identify a timing issue. And to do that, to identify timing issues, we have to be selective about what kind of video we're looking at, because I can't identify timing issues if I don't know when the ball's being delivered. So if I don't have video of the pitcher or the ball being delivered, it makes it really difficult to dissect what's actually happening in the video. And the other flaw that I like to check on is big stuff, right? Like big stuff. Like the hitting world's getting so detailed right now. Like people are talking about, scapular retraction and, occipital pelvis and whatever, all these things about very detailed little movements. And with high-speed video, it's really easy to get nuanced, right? To get into small little details that are, generally speaking, just little byproducts of what happens with the bigger muscles. And when we do that, I think it gets really easy to like lose sight of what the major things are. So identifying timing issues and finding big mechanical deficiencies are, I'd say, what I look for in terms of like identifying flaws, right? This is from, I'm going to kind of do this in two perspectives. I'm going to look at it from like coach and player. So what's the bad stuff that can happen as a coach? Well, it gets really easy. If I have a ton of video on a player, as I'm going through that video, it gets really easy to just find a video that is flawed and pick a problem that I want to address today, right? Like the reality of it is, if I hit the ball good, then I did good. If I hit the ball bad, then I didn't do good. So it becomes really easy to say, oh, well, this swing had this problem because the ball got cut or you rolled it over or, you mishit it or you swung and missed or whatever it is. And again, it becomes very, very easy to point to that and say, oh, well, you did this here because you didn't get the result you wanted. Hitting is happening in real time. Like the movements we make, the swings we take, the timing that we create is all happening instantaneously, right? Using video to like build a foundation for that stuff is great. But like within a subset of swings, right? Be it a session in a cage or any given at bat in a game, there's like a million different factors that happen. One of the things I talk about in the cage a lot is the cage is just a weird setting, or practice is a weird setting, because in baseball, we never, ever take more than one swing every 30 seconds or so, right? In the game. And here we are in the cage taking all these repetitions consecutively, right? Like over and over and over again. And that does two things. One, it creates fatigue. And two is it allows us in our minds to feel like we have do-overs, right? It allows us to have mulligans over and over again. And those two things combined can lead to crappy stuff happening in a practice session that really doesn't define how good the hitter is. So like we have to be careful of what we're looking at on video to address. The next part is the views, right? Like what view are we using for video? And certainly the implication that video is terrible is not what I'm trying to get across here, but we have to be a little bit more selective about how we use it. Again, the major factor for me, and the thing that I talk about all the time, and if anybody listens to the podcast we did with Jose, that's Batista, that is, for anybody that wasn't on when I was talking about it before. Like Jose talked about the change in his career, and it had everything to do with being ready on time, right? It was timing. He called it all timing. And I've addressed this in, I can't tell you how many conversations, but timing issues generally clean up a lot of stuff. Like if we learn how to be early with our body, we'll organize really, really well. that means, like, at a young age, if we can focus on how to be on time and how to create different tempos. And tempo is, I think, the ability to be slow and fast within the same set of movements when it's needed, right? So in terms of hitting, we talk about gather and then load. If we can gather early, right, we can control that in relation to the pitcher, to the delivered ball. And then we can load at different tempos, meaning going from, inward movements where barrel tip, like lift the leg, whatever you want to call those parts of the gather. And then we can start to understand how to load at different tempos, how to stretch at different tempos. That's what creates adjustability. So again, from a timing perspective, that's where a lot of deficiencies show up. And because of that, in video, when we're not addressing the timing component, we're doing a disservice to the player, right? The other piece of that is strike zone awareness, right? And recognition of what we're swinging at. Those are two huge factors that don't get talked about a lot, because natural tendency is when we have a hitter hitting in a cage, we put on a side view video, and then all of a sudden we're just going to look through that side view video. And again, we have no context. Like, we have this view, but the pitcher's out there. So how can we address if those boxes are being checked before we talk about nuancey details of the swing? And again, now we can look at any given video and it can tell us anything we want it to, right? It's kind of like, I would say, kind of like data and stats. Like, we can shape those conversations to say anything we want it to. And when we get in this like search of perfect, we're always going to find something wrong. And that's, I think, the major problem and the major flaw in the game right now. And this is how it transfers to the player, which is what I'll get into now. We're searching for a thing that doesn't exist. There is no perfect swing. There is no perfect set of mechanics. Like, they're all a little bit different, and they all have their own little nuances, and the styles that create the mechanics are a little bit different. So from a mechanical standpoint, when we talk about what needs to happen in the swing, there's two really major factors for me. And I talked about this, I addressed this a couple weeks ago. Can we disassociate? Can we get our hips to turn while the barrel's still working behind us? And then ultimately, can we get the barrel to turn around an axis, regardless of whether it's flat, regardless of whether it's steep, and the shoulders creating that plane? Like, the barrel has to turn around this axis, and it can be really tight or it can be loose. And that has everything to do with location of the pitch, timing of the moments, what we were sitting on, what we were looking for. And when we nitpick at video, when we don't tell that story before, when we don't know what the rest of the story is, we're going to find flaws no matter what. So this is a perfect example of like what happens to me a lot, right? And I mean that from a perspective of like people that I have relationships with. So this is a college player that I work with. He was playing summer ball, and he sends me this last summer. And he says to me, he goes, "What do you got?" And I'm like, "I don't know. What do you mean? Like, it's a random side view of a game, and we can watch it again. Like, what's wrong with this tape? What's wrong with it? I could play it over and over again. We could play it in slow motion. We could do a million different things, right? And I'll try to play it in slow mo here. Playback speed 0.5. See if that worked. Like, what's wrong with this swing? Do we know what's wrong with this take, I should say? Is there anything wrong? I have no idea, like, honestly, because the questions I asked him had everything to do with what I needed to know about being able to make an educated guess at what happened. I said, "Sam, who was pitching?" And he goes, "Oh, it was a righty." I go, "Sinker, four seam." I said, "Thumber, what's his velo?" I said, "Out of the stretch or out of the windup? What was the situation in the game? What was the count? How were you feeling?" These are all things that had to do with anything that happened here that we may or may not think is egregious, right? On a foundational level, I would have said, "Well, you look a little jumpy." you look like you were moving fast, right? But I have no idea what he was thinking about, what his thought process was, what he was leading up to in that moment. And because of this, I think because of the ability to do this over and over again, players are getting very caught up in what this looks like. And they're trying to chase a carrot that ultimately really doesn't exist. Sorry, I'm trying to switch. Pause. Next slide. Good. So from the player perspective, we're building these assumptions that any problem can get fixed from watching video. Like, set up a tripod and we're going to go fix whatever we want to fix. Like, hey, let me go just set up video. And I see it every day. Like, I go to random hitting sessions in a cage, and I get these 15-year-old kids that are just setting up a tripod. Like, they want to watch their video. That's like the narcissist in all of us, right? We all want to see ourselves hit. We all want to see ourselves do cool things. And I can't tell you how many times I watch video myself, be it the playoffs in the big leagues, any cool moments I created, even AAA or AA homers or whatever. You always want to watch the cool moments. So yeah, it's great to have video and be able to watch it and build that confidence up in yourself. But it's happening far too often. I was getting ready for the pre-Olympic stuff. I was going to go do Team USA in the spring, and I'm watching these pitchers. Like, they have to set up 2 cameras on each side of the field. They got tripods, they got Rapsodo, and I'm like, dude, you're throwing a bullpen, bro. Like, this is a touch and feel moment. And it was the same thing with hitters. Every hitter that stood in against a pitcher was having somebody else videotape their random march at bats with no fielders and no umpires. And I'm like, there's so much difference in adrenaline intensity and the way you're going to feel when there's 2, 3, 5,000 people here watching you, when the game matters, when the scoreboard's on, and when the stats go on the back of your bubblegum card. So the context of the information that we see in the video has to be really important. Because of this, I think, and this is why I call it a crutch, players are forgetting to build mindsets and feels. Like, at the end of the day, as a hitter, I have to own the ability to do what I want to do. And if I don't, I'm not going to be good, because then I'm just going to be what I call wish hitting. That was taught to me by coaches before me. Rich Goodman used to say it all the time. These guys just wish hitting, meaning like he's going up and swinging. He's trying to create a swing that plays in all the circumstances without understanding what he has to do. And the part that really made this all kind of hone in for me, we had Chris Bryant's dad, Mike Bryant, on the podcast. I want to say it was probably 3 months ago now. And Mike's awesome. Understands hitting inside out and backwards. Chris is obviously a really accomplished hitter. And one of the biggest things he talked about was Chris's deficiency with the ball up in the zone. And everybody knew that in baseball, right? Like, anybody that watched Chris Bryant hit knew he struggled with the ball at the top of the zone. And they talked about how they spent their entire offseason this past year going into the season. And they started their day, they put 150 balls or whatever the number was at the top of the zone, ball on a tee. And what they did is they worked they like paid attention to results of like what happened. And because of the results they were getting, or based on the results they were getting, Chris was identifying feels that happened within him to understand what his mindset, what his feel needed to be to counteract that pitch. Because if you don't build that, nothing else matters, right? Because you don't know how to have a go-to in the game when the guy does that to you. And that was what he said. He said Chris would always just default to, well, I'm going to stay in the middle. I'm going to trust my hands. I'm going to, try to stay on top. Whatever the default thoughts are for guys, because he didn't have anything to counteract that pitch. And so he just went with what he didn't know. And this is the piece where I think, again, the video analysis allows for players to not have to think. And let's face it, like, hitting is about critical thinking. Like, you can be talented, you can be skilled, but you can't become truly great until you match skill set and mindset. So what it's doing is it's like removing this art of like grinding and battling through failure for young generations. Like, I think it's just, oh, something's wrong, I got to go fix it. as opposed to like, nah, let me take it in the chin and like kind of identify, hey, A, the game's hard, and B, like I got to work through things sometimes, because during the season, we don't play at optimal all the time. It just does not happen. And that's the thing that I think is the hardest thing to convey to young hitters. And we need to do a better job of explaining that to them. Again, as a young player, when you don't really know, you're probably going to see what you want to see. Well, you're going to go watch a video of Gleyber Torres or, Gary Sanchez or, Rafael Devers or Joey Gallo or whoever the player is, Carlos Correa, Jose Altuve, and you're going to see what you want to see in relation to what happens with them. And then you're going to try to mimic them. And I think mimicking professional hitters is really good, but there's a line to draw in terms of like understanding what the big pieces of the swing are that matter. And that's why I try to keep the focus really, really narrow on, like, from a mechanical standpoint, can we disassociate and can we get the barrel to turn behind us? And then let's build from there. These are real life text messages that I got from players. Real life. There's 4 separate texts that we're going to address. There's 2 on this slide and 2 on the next one. Question. I'll call you later about this. Would you consider this wrap behind the head to be too exaggerated? And I'm not going to play the video, but like these are actual questions that I get from really, really high level hitters. Like these 2 are Division I college hitters. And then it's a random side view in a cage from the ground, because that's where they can set their camera up if they don't have a tripod. And my answers to that first text were like, what does that mean? Is my rap too exaggerated? I said, it doesn't matter. I said, it matters if we don't sequence out of it properly. Like if we wrap the bat around our head and get stuck, then it matters, because then the swing can get long and, the whole casting thing like that can happen. But if we tip the bat behind our head and we flow out of it well on time, then you can wrap the bat all you want. Heck, Gary Sheffield used to do this. Julio Franco had the bat like that. So really, like, there's more context to the question. But now he goes back and watches a video of himself from, 3 or 4 years ago. And he goes, well, my bat wasn't that wrapped then. And I'm like, well, you're a different hitter today than you were then. The next text, the one on the right side of the screen, or I guess left, depending on how you're looking at it. I have been trying to tighten up my radius like we worked on during the off season. Would you say this is a long radius, tight, or somewhere in between? I can't really tell because my eyes aren't that good at seeing it yet. Well, you want to watch video till you're blue in the face, but you have no idea what you're looking for. And then you have to ask me the question. And the response that I had to the question was, how did you hit the ball? How did you hit the ball? That's the answer. If you hit the ball good, then it was good. If you didn't, it was bad, right? And for all kinds of different reasons. But you're trying, again, to look at a side view video and get me to look at a side view video and say, hey, what's wrong here? And that's what you're doing. You're going home at night and thinking about it till you're blue in the face. 2 more texts, same thing. I just get clouded with mechanics. I said, I want you to get clouded with winning. Will I hit bombs like that and not cap everything? I said, I dare you to play 1 pitch at a time, 1 at bat at a time. Is that what you did when you're struggling? I said, yeah, because hitting is hard. I'm not going to find the answer in a video looking at mechanics. I'm going to find the answer in the cage, in BP, and in the game by grinding it out, making small adjustments based on what the game is telling me. And this one was my favorite, the last one. And by favorite, I mean probably least favorite. Now people get addicted to alcohol and drugs and other things. I think I'm addicted to watching movements in the swing. No matter how much I tell myself, it doesn't matter. I still watch hours of swing, dissect every movement in my head. I said, that's fine. Just control it. And then that's a video of me hitting in the cage in 2013. He goes, I watched this 1,000 times today. And I said, okay, cool. Like if you watch it to absorb the good stuff, that's great. But like, what are you watching it for? Because you're trying to deem a swing to be perfect. And now you're going down this rabbit hole of like trying to make your swing look exactly like that and assuming that that's going to make you a good hitter. And that's terrifying. Like that's terrifying to me. And these are just some examples. Like I could have pulled up 100 text messages for this. This isn't how hitting gets taught. Hitting gets taught internally. Hitting gets taught through player and ball. Like, you have to become your own best self-evaluator. And it's good to watch video and understand what's important, but you have to have a foundation of elements that go with it. Here's some solutions I think we can kind of have for ourselves anyway, as instructors, consigliaries, coaches, whatever you want to call it. Limit the number of swings that are recorded in the cage. Just limit it. If you're in control of a session, you can limit the amount of video that gets used. You can limit your players' access to video. If they have video, they're going to look at it. If they don't, they won't. It's that simple. And they're going to listen to us, to you. Make sure there's context in the information. If you're working on something very specific, then like video's fine, right? Chris Bryant example, ball at the top of the zone. If you're working on that and you want to see something, you want to see your elbow position on that ball at the top of the zone, great, be my guest. But like, let's pump the brakes a little bit on just videotaping every swing and assume that every swing is built the same. Make sure we're paying attention to speeds, location, and we have context of when the ball's leaving and whether we're on time or not before we do anything else. Are we on time? Did we swing at a good pitch? Those are the first two things we got to talk about. We have to force players into addressing things that matter so that they can build that bucket for themselves. They can build those references so that when they get to a position, when they struggle, or when they have a problem based on, oh, well, I'm struggling with the ball down and away. Well, what's your go-to in that moment? What's your default on the ball down and away? Well, I'm struggling with the breaking ball. Well, what do you do when you're getting out front and you're not controlling your timing? Hey, I'm in between on pitches. Well, what's my reference point there? How do I simplify at that moment? I'm late to the fastball and I'm early to the breaking ball. Well, it's because you're trying to get out front and you're not seeing the ball. Like, eliminate one of them. Like, you have to have all these defaults as a player. So we have to teach those things to players. And most of the time, the answers are not in video. You have to be advanced enough to understand. And when I say advanced, that's probably the wrong word. You have to harness the information that you get from video analysis. Look, we live in a world right now where, especially in Twitter hitting, and without talking specifically about anyone, oh, we got to match video. And I'm like, you're just picking whatever video you want to fit your narrative on a player. And we're acting like hitters are robots. Like, they're not. Hitters are not robots. Hitting exists in the infrastructure of suck the least. Like, try to suck the least today. It's not like, hey, be perfect. And because all the narratives are pushing down this rabbit hole of like, be perfect. Well, dude, that doesn't exist. Like, perfect does not exist. The players that get really good at hitting get really good at sucking the least. For players, especially, like, try to work in environments that won't tempt you to go fall on your crutch, right? To go fall on it, to go rely on it. Work on external focuses, specific drills, specific outcomes. And then if you want to take video of those things, like when you're hitting by yourself, like, just stay focused on why you're watching the video. Stay focused on what the reasoning behind it is. Like, limit viewing your stuff to the good outcomes. Forget the bad ones. Just forget it. Throw them away, right? Those bad outcomes are only going to create negative thoughts moving forward. And if anybody thinks like me at all, negative thoughts were like the thing that derailed my career in multiple places. Now, I had the pleasure of playing 17 years of professional baseball. And I look back on it now, I think about how much anxiety I had, especially in high school and college when I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I look back on that and I go, man, oh man, like it was treacherous. There were times when I couldn't talk to my friends. I couldn't talk to my family. I didn't want to go out. I didn't want to do anything because I was so focused on the negative stuff that was happening in the baseball game. So what we need to do with the video, reinforce the good stuff. When you're struggling, go watch video of you hitting a homer. Go watch video of you hitting the best bullet you've hit. And just let that sink in. Watch full at-bats. Stop just watching the moment in time. Like, watch at-bats. Watch how you went through at-bats. Think about the sequences of pitches. This is where I call it the Inception effect. The movie Inception, if anybody saw it. Like, just making somebody believe that, an idea is their own. Well, like, through this, and I guess you could call it, osmosis too. when you start watching sequences of pitches more often and you start paying attention more often, then you're going to be able to understand things better by default, even if it's just a little bit better. Hey, well, it's 2-0. The pitcher had this guy on first, and, you know, he was in this moment in the game, he was going through this. This is why fastball was, you know, it was coming here. Or, oh, well, I got behind in the count. I knew when he was getting behind, when he was getting ahead in the count, he liked to, you know, ride his fastball up in the zone or whatever it is. But like, force yourself into like paying attention to those things, because those things matter just as much as anything else. And ultimately, like, gather good information from it, whether it be in terms of sequencing, whether it be in terms of pitch selection, whether it be in terms of making sure you're staying in the zone, what you're swinging at. A major flaw, I think, for young hitters a lot is they have this tendency to not understand that what they swing at matters. And they're just like, oh, I went 0 for 4. And, oh, well, what, like, the first question I asked is like, okay, walk me through your at-bats. One of the players in the text messages texted me the other day, and this was the craziest thing, right? We want to talk about riding emotional waves. So the player in question who said, I'm obsessed with video, right? I'm addicted to video. 2 weeks ago, 3 for 3 in an exhibition at school, right? In practice, scrimmage, whatever. And he's feeling great. Yeah, it's awesome. I think I understand what you're talking about, blah, blah, blah. I'm feeling good. Next game, 2 for 3. Oh, dude, everything's awesome. 0 for 4 happens. 0 for 4 happens this past weekend. I get a text message saying, hey, can you talk? Sure. What do you got? Hey, well, you know, I started watching some video of, you know, so-and-so. Like, what do you think about, like, and I was like, are we really doing this again? Is that really what we're going to do right now? Like, you started watching video because you went 0 for 4, because you thought the answer was in the video, and it's not. It's just not where it is. It can be, but it depends on what you're looking for. Why the reason we built Pelotero was specifically to counteract a lot of this stuff. And again, hitting lives in real time. And again, part of the solution for us is like, we're going to build programs for hitters based on their deficiencies. So they don't even need to think about what their deficiency is. Hey, here you go. Just go do this. And like, listen, I'm probably a bad salesman, but like, whether you use Pelotero or not, like, hey, work on what you suck at and learn from it. Work on what you suck at and learn from it. Like, let that information sink into what you're doing. Let the feel of every swing. And if you need to take more, but work on the thing that you stink at. Because that feeling can now seep into your body and help become a place where you default to when you encounter those same things in the game. The goal is not in practice to just take swings that involve best outcomes. Like, I've seen it for too long. I see too many young players. And then, like, hey, we're taking video. And, oh, look at my best bolt today. I got video of my best bolt today while I went full leg kick, full barrel tip, no timing considerations because the guy was flipping the ball. And then all of a sudden they're like, well, that's my best swing. And I'm like, no, it's not. That is not your best swing, because that's not the swing that matters. By putting the focus on specific outcomes, we as people, as humans, have this tendency, if we put ourselves in those shoes, if I tell you to hit the ball over a second baseman's head and I dangle a carrot in front of you and say, hey, do this, like, you're going to want to do it. If it's a competition, right? Part of what we did with the go zones on the hit track stuff was like, hey, hit the ball here. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Like, we have to like let our hitters shape their own narratives. And this is like a big overarching theme in all of this, right? Like, we've made all these advancements, blah, blah. We have all these organizations and travel coaches, and private instruction is through the roof and all these things. And I think ultimately we all care about making the game better, right? We want to help make the game better. And as coaches, I think we're like almost too much, right? And another one of the players that had sent me one of those text messages, and this is how ironic things are, and I had experienced this as a player, we all have our aha moments, right? Like we all have like the light bulb goes off, and usually it's, you know, a year after you heard something, or 6 months or 3 months or whatever, depending on how open-minded you are as a player. And one of the guys in question sends me a text. He goes, dude, I figured something out today. He's like, I got to call you. And I'm like, nice. So he calls me, and because I hate having hitting conversations through text. After all those texts that you saw before, it's always like, you know, I hate talking about hitting in text messages. Too much misinformation. So he says, and I was like, nice. Were you hitting BP? Were you in the cage? He goes, nah, I was in stats and probability class. And I went, what? He's like, yeah, I was in probability class, and the teacher was talking about, you know, coin flips and the percentage of coin flips, and how this 50-50 proposition doesn't necessarily translate to every individual coin flip. And, you know, how over time you can go through long stretches of heads showing up or tails showing up, or whatever it might be. And it's not always suited to be that way. So in hitting, I started realizing that, like, I can go through stretches where I'm not good, and that doesn't mean I'm not a 300 hitter. And I was like, you know, ding, ding, ding. And like, you have that moment, but you have that moment as a player when you're ready for it. And I think the thing that I've wanted to do is try to force that moment on people for a long time. And the older I get, the more I'm realizing it's going to be organic, and that all I can do as a coach is give them, like, take them to the water, like just take them there and say, here you go. This is it. Now you got to figure it out. And that's not to say that I'm not going to help along the way or be supportive or any of those things, but those aha moments happen for players when they're ready for them to happen. And I think we have to, number one, be less critical of ourselves as coaches, and trying to force feed information and saying, oh, well, I have all the answers, or I have this, or you got to do this, or you got to do that. Because A, players resent you for that. And B, as much as you're excited to share your information, you have to have this recognition that your players need to be ready to receive it. That is my presentation for the day. Everybody stay raking. That's my signature. This is going to be my sign-off page because I like it, because I like Volt Yellow, and it's part of our logo, and we'll go from there.
That's good, Chris. I'm trying to pin myself here.
Yeah, and no questions in the chat, but if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask.
Yeah, I have a couple notes that we'll start with. Anybody that has any chat stuff? Jason just said, great stuff. Thanks so much for this reinforcement, not to overcoach. Couple notes that I have. I'm actually going to take a picture of my notes that I took, and I'll post that. I'll probably just put that on Twitter. Concept of good athletes are the best compensators. Have you seen that? People talk. It's like a big thing right now. People love talking about how good hitters are good compensators, or good athletes are good compensators. And it seems like there's a negative connotation to that. And I'm like, that's what a good athlete is. And people are trying to fix the connotation. And I'm like, that's just what good is. And in the context of this webinar, the compensating moves, like we've talked in the past about the time to impact metric on like a swing sensor. I'm like, I want a hitter that can be good when the swing is really, really quick and when it's really, really extended. So this whole hyper focus on having the right mechanics, you talked about it a lot, but understanding and valuing compensation when you're looking at video, I think is really powerful. Instead of just saying it's got to be perfect, say, hey, look what you did good here to get a hit when it wasn't perfect. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I love what you just talked about, because it's missing the component, right? Like what is the test? The test is being good. The test is being good at the game. And I think this will kind of fold into the question that just came through. How am I encouraging self-organization for clients? At the end of the day, like, you have to decide how good you want to be. And if you're cool with being good, like, or okay, or average, then like you're just going to be average, and you're going to make excuses for the reasons why you struggle. If you want to be really good, or if you want to see how good you can be, then you have to be honest with yourself. So like what I try to do from the standpoint of how I engage with these guys, and I should say guys and girls, because I've talked to some softball girls too. Like, make a decision. First of all, like tell me, be candid with me. Cause I assume that if you come talk to me about hitting, that you want to be awesome. That's my presumption, because I wanted to be awesome every day of my life. Now, I'm not going to say that I was perfect at how I prepared or how I practiced, because that's just not even a thing. But every day I woke up, I wanted to be awesome and I wanted to play in the big leagues. So if that's the presumption, right, if we can agree on that, then the first thing we do is educate about what the process is. So like, how do I encourage it? Is I say, look, I can be a resource for you, but I'm not here to tell you what to do. Like, I will never tell you what to do as a hitter. I'll tell you what I see. I'll tell you what I think, predominantly when you ask me. But like, I'm not coming in the cage to be like, hey, do this. It's just not what I do. So if you want to hit with me, you better start asking questions, or you better start talking about things that you're feeling, because then I can take that down a path based on experiences that I've had. So when we talk about self-organizing, I'm like, what it comes down to is just make a decision. Like, and it's really simple. It's really, really simple. Hey, do you want to be really good? Do you want to play in the pros? Do you want to play in the big leagues? And we can layer even more. You want to be a Hall of Famer? You want to be an all-star? You want to be a big leaguer? You want to be a minor leaguer? You want to get drafted? Like, what is it? Let's talk about it. And then if you're cool with all this other stuff, then we can just go, all right, like, we'll hit, and it'll be fun, and you can hit however you want, and we'll go from there. So when I talk about self-organizing, like, you have to associate a feel of what happened in a result to what you were thinking about before the swing. Every player, every individual, and I've said this a bunch of times in the last year or two, life's like create a player, right? And Matt Barbuto, who was on this call, he hit with us for a few years when Bobby still had the place in New Hampshire. I always used to talk about this stuff. Like, if you don't think every swing, you're doing yourself a disservice. And it's okay, like, if when you're 12 or 13 or 14, like, I know it's harder, but like in creative player, you have a certain amount of points allotted to a certain amount of things, right? You have, athleticism, hand-eye coordination, blah, 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 all the skills necessary to be a good hitter. Like, on some of those skills, you're going to be further down on your, capability. So you have to increase your capability at those things. Mike Trout doesn't have to worry about athleticism ever. Never, like, until he gets like probably 49, right? Strong and athletic. But maybe like he had to work harder on the mental side, or maybe he had to work harder on the pitch recognition side, or maybe he had to work better on the strike zone awareness side. And like, you just have to focus on those things and really put an emphasis on growing that category so that you put yourself in a position to be successful. So that's a lot of what I talk about, is like, look, if you have a hard time thinking during rounds, well, we got to figure out the tools to help you learn how to do that.
Yeah. I think most people would be shocked if you had Chris and I in the cage, how much we talk about timing and what are you trying to do, as opposed to do this with your back elbow, do this with your lead arm, feel this with this part of your body. It's the new age term for it is swing attractors, where it's like, that's what everybody wants to talk about because it sounds cool. But it's like, are you trying to pull the ball? Are you trying to go oppo? Are you trying to get under? Are you trying to get it over? Like, are you trying to hit it deep? Are you trying to hit it out front? Like, what are you trying to do? What is your point of emphasis? What is your brain telling you to do? And most kids just black out and don't think anything. They just swing because the ball's coming at them. So getting them to the point where they're thinking well, and then getting them on time. Because if they're not on time, their swing's going to fail. It's going to blow up. So most hitters, that's where their fail point is with their timing, not with anything else. So having a good baseline. You talked about going back to and not focusing on the negatives of the swing, which I really liked, and not dwelling on things like making outs and nitpicking your swing. Do you have any stories about teammates that you don't have to name names if you don't want to, but in Silicon Valley, they have that one like hype up video that they would watch about like, be the alpha male. Guys that would watch their like a Homer highlight reel to get themselves dialed in or feeling good.
Oh yeah. I mean, look, when you deal with alphas, alphas want an alpha, man. And the most candid and obvious example of that was the third baseman MVP of the 2015 season. Josh would always have video available of like stuff he did really well. And you'd see him on his phone, and then he'd randomly just stand up in the bus and be like, "Hey, look at this." And then, just get loud about it. But I mean, I did it all the time. Like I try, if I did something good in the game, I couldn't wait to go back and watch it. There was a funny, like the red light Colabello story came from this, right? My first games on television were in independent ball on local charter TV3. And it was the first time in my life I had access to game video. The only other video that I'd ever seen of myself was the 2004 NECBL All-Star game, because we didn't have cell phones. And I want to say the couple times in high school when the local news station would come and do like, 2 or 3 innings, and you just had to be lucky enough to be the guy that was hitting and did something cool in that moment to get on the news. And I always used to remember, I'd see them sitting up the TV cameras, and I go, I got to do something tonight. And every time without fail, I mean, 85% of the games we played on TV, I did something cool just so and I had VHS tapes that I would just go back and watch over and over again. So I was the ultimate, like, hey, go watch this to make yourself feel good. And that's why I tell so many Homer stories. That's probably why they're so vivid in my mind, Bobby.
Next question is, I wrote, who is your gatekeeper of good? So we talked to Jason Ferber a lot, Coach Ferbs on Instagram, and he likes telling us stories about how he's got players who will smoke a double in a game, and they'll send it to the swing coach and be like, oh yeah, it's not a good swing. And then they just smoke a double, and their coach is telling them that's not good. A lot of kids right now, think that somebody else is the one to tell them their swing is good or bad. And this whole like gatekeeper of good. In your opinion, your thoughts, who should be the one to determine if your swing is good, or
Me.
what should be determined?
Me. That's it. Me. And listen, I say that with a very clear understanding of the fact that I was fortunate enough to have people in my life that I knew I could lean on, right? And this is, in so many ways, I reference Rich Gedman and what he did for me. I got to the point where I knew I could trust Rich so implicitly that I didn't even have to think twice about what I said to him, how I talked to him. It got to the point where if Rich told me that like jumping off a building was going to make me a better hitter and a better person, I was going to do it without even vetting the information. And, I wish that for everyone in their lives, but this is part of the issues in today's society is like, we're sitting here and there's somebody down the street that's going to tell you that they know better than somebody else. And that's why it's dangerous, right? Like, that's why it's dangerous to have access to too much information, because there's somebody else that's going to say, oh, well, you're better than this, or you're not that good, or you're that. And you could see it and you could hear it. Like the old out of sight, out of mind adage is beautiful, right? If you've never encountered somebody that's telling you that you ain't good, well, you're never going to think you're not good, right? It's like the small town kid in the 70s, 60s, 50s. Like, he doesn't know that he's not good. He doesn't know he's not as good as everybody else. So he's built up confidence, and that can be good or bad, right? Because then when you get exposed to it, it can be different. So at the end of the day, like, you have to be your own evaluator. And when I say that, I mean, paying attention to what's going on around you and figuring out, okay, how good is best, right? How good is best? So the general rule, like, is how do you set the bar, right? Like, where do you set the bar? Well, every day you go to the field, you look around, you go, who's the best guy out here? Who's the best guy on the field? And now that's your bar. That's your barometer that you have to meet if you want to be the best guy on the field. Because if you want to be the best guy on the planet, you better be the best guy on this field today. And then obviously, in local circles, you look around and say, okay, who's the best player? And it doesn't, like, none of that is related to what a swing coach says or what a movement is about or a mechanical thing. It's just like who's the guy that you look at on this field that you want up to bat in the ninth inning with 2 outs and the tying run on second base every time. And that's the guy that you need to go beat.
Love it. I used to do that. I used to pick the shortstop specifically. When I was playing short, I wanted to beat the shortstop that day and prove myself to that team, prove myself to the fans. Like I'm gonna be better than that guy today. Concept of being able to analyze yourself, making comp clips, and just the whole concept of like being educated about what is good, what is bad. And I think making your own clips is one of the most important things you can do. If you're trying to get into swing mechanics, if you're trying to get into analysis, making comparison clips is one of the best tools you can use. And the coolest thing about it is when you start doing different syncs. So typically people will only make syncs, meaning taking two clips, matching them up, and sync it to contact. When you start doing like fastball versus breaking ball, you start doing release point to release point on that, and then contact to contact. You can do like highest point of leg kick. You can get pretty creative with what you're syncing up, and you start to see the differences in how guys move and when they move. It's really, really cool. One of my favorite videos I've ever made was this like 20-minute video of David Ortiz, and it was a lefty doing from the windup, from the stretch, from a quick pitch, fastball, curveball, slide, or fastball, slider, from all the different variations, and comparing when he started. And no matter what happened, he got ready for release at the same time. It's just a really awesome video. And you can, if you sync it up to contact, it looks weird because he's at one point you were talking about ability of changing tempo.
Yeah.
And to see Ortiz do it, where he had a big pump of the hands, big leg lift, and he was able to still get to the same point at the same time when it matters most, get to release point where you got to kind of pass the baton to your eyes to say, all right, you figure out what's coming. I'm going to keep moving and doing what I need to do to create my length the way that I need to for the pitch that I'm facing.
That's why I think tempo is by far the least talked about thing. And I call it tempo, and it probably has other terminology. It's probably length of timing or whatever the terminology is behind it. Like tempo is just the right word because tempo is the beats in the music, right? It's the different speed of the song. And like to be on time, right? The gather has to happen early. And generally speaking, it's going to be around the same time, right? In relation to pitcher A or pitcher B or pitcher C. And then we have to change tempos. And I think that's the hardest thing for young players to do is change tempos. We watch it all the time. You throw at one speed, they hit it hard. You can get kids out in the cage just changing speeds a little bit. And again, that's part of the repetition thing in BP where you're like, go, 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 go. And you get caught up in this world where it's like, you're missing the crux of what we're trying to accomplish. And I think even just the way we throw BP, like, you're trying to, and look, there's lines everywhere, right? You're trying to rush through 12 hitters in a 2-hour session, or you're trying to rush through 20 hitters. Like, we got to be more calculated, but that's why I always say err on the side of, like, the stupid cliche line is quality versus quantity, right? Would you rather have each guy take 6 really good swings or 20 horseshit swings?
We used to do BP rounds where I would just alternate fastball, curveball, and tell kids, you got to go pull with the fastball, oppo with the curveball. So you're like going to extremes of the timing windows, and then you switch it where you have to pull the curveball and then hit the fastball oppo. So the mental gymnastics, the adjusting that you have to do to make that happen is really fun. I used to do wiffle balls, white in the air, green on the ground. So I had 2 different color wiffle balls. So you're just changing aim points. I love doing rounds where it's like only swing at fastball rounds, and you just throw like 6 curveballs in a row and then get a kid to freeze on a fastball. You're like, dude, that's the only thing you're supposed to swing at. How do you freeze on a fastball when that's all you're looking for? But it's just getting more into like how many swings do you take during a game? And then how many swings you take into practice? And is the focus level the same? And if we pull that back to video analysis, there's Instagram and Twitter is full of kids trying to perfect a swing off of a tee or underhand flips, and they're spinning off everything. And when they time it up perfect, it feels awesome. When everything clicks, it feels amazing. And then they can't hit. That
goes full right back into the middle of the crux of this argument. It's like, oh, the match video stuff, match video. Like, like, what are we talking about? Like, what are we talking about? You know, you're creating, you're putting the video into the words of ideal circumstances, right? Like, this video is ideal. Like, oh, I was perfectly on time to a heater. I knew it was coming. I see the guy really well. And then all of a sudden I just clicked them. Right. And now, oh, we got to match that swing. No, you don't. Like, you have to match some of the elements that happened in terms of gather and load, and that's it. And then, like, now be adjustable within that. So it's exactly what you talked about with Ortiz, and the differences between how he prepared. Like, you know, hey, he gathered, his leg lift was at the same place at the same time. But then beyond that, like, a million different things happened. And so, no, I don't have to match video. You don't have to match video. That's a crock of crap. Like, you have to match your early stuff, the big movements, the gather. You have to be able to get the hips to turn while the barrel's working behind. And that way you become more adjustable.
Yeah. Like upstream versus downstream. I explained that to a parent the other day, how the moves that you do early are going to define the moves that happen late. But everybody's focused on fixing the stuff that happens late without addressing the things that happen early.
Yeah.
So they're dealing with all symptoms and never getting to root cause.
That was it was in the presentation. I didn't touch on it as long. It's like, don't like nitpick at little things that are they're just byproducts.
Yeah. Very good. Those are all my notes.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any questions? Feel free to shoot them in the chat. As always, we're more than happy to stick around if there's questions.
And talk. You can talk.
Yeah, either raise your hand or unmute yourself, and we'll answer more questions. We'll dig into this more if you want, but if nobody's got questions, we'll wrap it up. Or Chris and I, we're just gonna get back on the phone anyway. So
yeah, I actually have the text that came through. I don't know if people could see it on my screen. College softball coach, in your opinion, how long does it take to learn how to hit?
What a question! What a question!
Forever. Takes forever.
It's a practice. So when they call doctors, like, doctors have practices, it's because they're always learning and getting better. It's like an ongoing process. Like, hitting is a practice. It's not there's no end point.
Let's put it this way. I feel unique in the sense that I feel like I know how to hit. And I say that with full acknowledgement, is the reason I know how to hit is because I know that I don't know how to hit. Like, it's existential, it's artistic, it's one of those things. Like, it's an evolution, right? So you're always evolving and growing. And I think your analogy was great, Bobby, where for everything that you learn, for everything that you know, it opens up like these 10 other doors that you don't know yet. So you acknowledge the fact that your limitations are your strengths, right? Your limitations, your ability to be imperfect and accept it is I think true, like, foundational happiness, and what you end up ultimately building off of, right? It's weird because I always thought when I was a kid, well, I need to be better. And now I go, the things that the things that I would chase now, and I think I said this, I was like, I wish I could implant myself into a major league season right now at 0 for 20. And I was just 0 for 20. And people are like, why wouldn't you be 19 for 20? I was like, it's too easy. If I was 19 for 20, I'm off to the races, dude. Like, nobody stopped me there. But I want to be 0 for 20 because I know I could handle it. Where 10 years ago, not in my wildest dream, I would have been having panic attacks and, like, losing my mind and not being able to sleep at night instead of just go play and see what happens and just make your adjustments along the way. And I think those things, I wish, and what I would like to see is how other people feel. What I would like to really ultimately understand is how other people deal with stuff like that. Because even with young players, when I talk to them, I have an idea of how they're feeling, and they'll ask me a question. I'll be like, well, this is why, right? And they're like, how'd you know? And I go, well, I've been there. I ran the race, man. It's not hard for me to presume. It's not hard for me to acknowledge the way I felt. Now the details might be a little different, but it's, it's the world, the hitting world and the hitting identities and things that affect our thoughts and our mind they're unique and interesting and at the same time devastating, right? And I think that's why true acceptance of the fact that like it's not that big a deal is ownership, right? That's to me that's what ultimately defines ownership.
Love it. All right. Anybody else have anything?
T-minus 30 seconds.
I was going to do a 3, 2, 1, but if we want to give 30
10
seconds. You're welcome, Riley. Thanks for joining us. Stay warm.
Anybody likes listen to the podcast with Jose? It was freaking awesome. That was my favorite hitting conversation ever.
iPhone says, thanks for the info. You're welcome, iPhone. Don't know your name, but thank you for joining us. Any hands raised? Nope. All right, we're wrapping it up. We'll get this pushed out. Everybody's leaving.
Yep. See ya. I'm going to eat lunch.
Pickle out.
Pickle out. Webinar out. Later.
Okay. See ya.